Welcome everyone to AfroCannes, sponsored by Deadline. This will be our opening panel, so sit back, enjoy. We're going to be discussing global distribution barriers for Afro content as well as the value of African IP. I'll hand over to our fantastic moderator and enjoy the session, please.
Yeah, thank you, Zoe. And welcome everyone. Hope you're having a great time at Cannes. Are you? I am. I've been telling my co-panelists here that I've been sleeping very late. I woke up this morning and slept this morning. So if I'm a little wheezy, bear with me. But it's so great to be here in Cannes for the very first time and to be here moderating this session on global distribution, IP and politics and how it affects us as content creators in Africa and beyond. I'd like to congratulate AfroCannes for putting this platform together to help provide opportunities for us to discuss issues that affect us as people of African descent or people dealing with content that has to do with Africa or the diaspora. My name is Patricia Bebia Mawa. I'm the Executive Vice President of Afro Global Television and Broadfree Media in Canada. And I'd like to pass the mic to my fellow panelists, or well, not my fellow panelists, I'm the moderator, but to the panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves in just a 1 minute. 1 minute? Yes, I see some people are like, what? Yeah, but just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and yeah, we'd like to get to know you. So I'll start with you, Mariëtte.
So I was the executive director of the Berlin International Film Festival in the past 5 years. I stopped in April because my contract finished and I wanted to have more time for smaller projects. The Berlin Film Festival is a very big festival with an eclectic program. So it has the chance to really reach out to the different audiences in Berlin, which is, I think, also important for the distribution of African films from Africa or from people from the African diaspora. Before, I worked for German films and I did the marketing of German cinema around the world. So that's my global aspect. I traveled to many festivals. Before that, I was a producer. And before that, I worked in distribution in Germany. So I hope I can contribute to this panel a little bit.
Good morning. My name is Kagisho Papela. I'm a senior deal maker at the Industrial Development Corporation of South Africa. We invest in film and television across content creation, infrastructure, and distribution platforms. And one of the issues we're always grappling with is the issues of collateral and predictable cash flows. So the topic today is very key to how we actually assess our investment proposals. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much to AfroCannes and to Prudence to organize this wonderful event. I'm Betty Sulty-Johnson, based in Paris, Afro-Caribbean background, and I've been distributor for the past 15 years, selling content, European contents, and at some point in my career, I've actually sold some Afro-descent content from Africa, the Caribbean. I've been working for many organizations where I could understand that African content is valuable. And from next month, I will become an independent producer. I've been helping a lot of producers getting confidence on the content, selling content to the likes of Netflix, France Télévisions, Mnet, Showmax, and I'm delighted to be part of this panel. Thank you very much for the invite.
Thank you. Merci, Prudence. Thanks for AfroCannes. My name is Francis Nébot. I had a former life in telecommunication. I spent more than 25 years with Alcatel, and I've been traveling worldwide. And mainly I was in charge in a big account in Nigeria. Then I left the company. I set up my own consulting company. I've been chatting with Nigeria for 24 years. I set up my company in 2019 and then 2010. And then 2017, I decided to come back to my first love when I was a student, which is cinema. So I started dubbing the blockbusters from Hollywood into French to distribute them in France and in French-speaking Africa in theaters, licensing them. Then I was advisor for Vivendi to set up their movie hall in Nigeria, in Abuja. And thanks to COVID, because I distributed some of the movie of the new wave of filmmakers in Nigeria, I started to become a co-producer with a new wave. So we did 2 movies, Juju Stories. We went to Locarno, we got a prize, and it's on Amazon Prime. And Mami Wata, who got a prize in Sundance. I've been finishing one or two other movies. I ventured into animation as well and documentaries, and definitely challenge of Nigeria cinema industry. We can speak a lot, and this is why I'm happy to be here with these prominent leaders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You can see that we have an amazing group of panelists here who will be discussing this very important topic. I was speaking to a producer earlier on, and he's from South Africa, and he was telling me about how for him to access funding, he has to have international distribution. And we know that distribution is everything, because you can produce the best content, but if you don't get a good distribution deal, not only will you not get your content seen, but you will not be able to make, the money that you need to make another, project. But I would like us to talk about the intersection between politics and IP. But before we do that, I would like to speak with you, Betty, about your experience as someone with over 20 years of experience in distributing African content. So how's the experience been, in this line, distributing African content? Because I know distributing African content is not the same as distributing content from other, places.
Thank you very much. So there is a room for African content. Nowadays, I would say the broadcasters, the streamers, they are looking for something else, new narratives. They are looking for something different of what we call the copy paste at the moment. And you can see that our stories are strong based on current IP, could be books, could be our living in Africa, in the Caribbean. And as Francis said, there's a lot, our stories are rich, and we have to take control of our narratives. So over the past 15 years, I have seen, changes when it comes to selling content. When I started to actually sell content to streamers or broadcasters, the license fee was very, very small. But then suddenly I realized as a distributor that I could actually negotiate. And I was negotiating on, prices that we were getting from festivals, negotiating on casting, saying, this person is valuable. So obviously you will get members and subscribers to watch this movie, this documentaries or whatever. So the idea for me as a distributor was always to negotiate and to value the content of Africa, of the Caribbean and the diaspora. And I've managed, from 1,000 to 300,000 and plus to get proper prices, license fee, to be honest with you. And I would say that the reason being is that we took and we are taking control of our narrative and we are respecting our content. So it has evolved. What has also evolved in my job is that we've actually started to think as a producer, not only as a distributor. So as a distributor, you are facing the content buyers, the streamers, the broadcasters, and you are aware of the constraints and what they are looking for as far as narratives and content is concerned. So this is why easily I've actually moved into co-producing some content. I was actually pushing and got involved on helping producer to prepare their financing plan, the budget, and to be aware of the money they could ask to the broadcaster right from the beginning as well.
Yes. Yeah, great. And I like that you talked about the fact that, distributors should be involved in producing because they know what the people want. They know what the streamers want, the broadcasters and all the other platforms to be able to tailor it to suit them. And that brings me to the next question. Now, you also did mention that African stories are unique and rich. What I find is that in trying to get distribution or trying to get our content seen, sometimes we change our stories to suit what others want to see. And that, takes away from the authenticity. Like when I watch a lot of African movies on Netflix these days, they're very Western. Most of them are very Western. There's still some authentic ones, but do you think that we're beginning to lose authenticity in trying to conform and get our stories, get more international platforms to reckon with us? I'd like to throw that to you, Mawa, and then I will have you say something about that as well. Or do you want to start?
I'll just get him the mic.
It's quite an interesting question, really, because as a financier, we consciously try to not get involved in creative calls. But then I will relate to you what I've seen, what my clients go through when they surrender their creative control to the streamers, is that the initial storyline and the script, the way they imagined it, gets most of the time watered down to be palatable to the audience. So in that process, the end product ends up not really reflecting the authenticity of the original script. But I suppose the audience may not always be aware that that has happened. But if you've been part of the project from the beginning, by the time you see the final product, you realize that actually it's nowhere close to the hard-hitting original script that they had in place. So it does dilute the authenticity, if you can say, but somehow it makes it more commercially palatable. So it remains the biggest, contrast in trying to assess projects. Say, if I emphasize on the authenticity and creative control by the producer, then my investment doesn't come back. But if the producer is willing to compromise and let creative interference take over, they get the best price for their product. So we remain, but I think it's a structural problem that maybe in another conversation we can talk about in terms of how we empower ourselves to control our own platforms so we don't have to deal with this.
Yeah, I agree. It's very difficult to have the right balance between authenticity and being seen, because it's not only about recoupment or financial matters, but also you want your films and your stories to be seen by a larger audience, and you don't want maybe only to reach out to your own fixed audience. At least I think a filmmaker usually wants more people to see his film. So I think we have this problem, or we had these issues at the Berlinale too. Where is the authenticity, and where is your audience, and how do you manage to combine to get the best combination? But I think that's a question you have for many other national cinemas as well. Like if you talk about a film from Turkey, you have the same question: how authentic is it, and how big is the audience? So I think this is maybe not the task of the financier, but the task of the filmmaker together with his producer to see how can I tell my story in such a way that a larger audience is interested. But it's a big question. I don't have the real answer.
Interesting. Well, we'll just put a pause on that for now. Francis, I'd like to speak to you about the challenges, you face trying to distribute French content. Because I know that has an added layer of, challenge. So tell us a little bit about your experience, how it's been, and some of the things that you've done, not just in distributing content that originally made in French, but in also dubbing English content to French.
Thank you, Patricia. Yes, I started in 2017, I said, so we pick up the biggest title, Nollywood blockbusters, Wedding Party 1, 2, Merryman. The main issue, there are two main issues. The first one, you want a movie to travel, then you need to dub it in different languages. And whatever you can say, African cinema is great, the image is becoming much and much better, I think, but the sound is the worst part. I have to be frank, this is, and for historical reasons, when you are shooting, like you shoot in Nigeria, life in the streets, and suddenly there is no electricity, the generator comes up, then you are sure that your soundtrack is going to be. So you have to redo all the soundtrack, all the sound editing, sound design. So it costs a lot of money. Then you have the dubbing on top of it. So basically, you need to redo. So till you got a proper international, what we call international soundtrack, when you just do a plug and play, you record your voices in French, Italian, German, then you just put it with the music, then it's fine. If not, you have to do. That's one point. Second point, the budget of African movies are not the budget of big international standards. They are below 1 million euro. They can reach, I mean, at one point of time in Nigeria, you could make a movie for $10,000. Okay, thank God that's increased, but basically you could look at 50 to 500K. And when you have to deal with distribution, it's like being on a poker table. Maybe you're going to invest so much, $10,000 into the distribution in order to get the money. But then basically in France, I started to distribute, and if you don't put minimum of $30,000 or euro rather, you don't get nowhere. So the producers are not going to be happy because they will tell you with $30,000, I can make another movie. I mean, I'm exaggerating just to give you. So at the end of the day, the people are not going to see, the producer and the filmmaker are not going to see the money back. So they are not going to reinvest into it. So that's a very big issue. That's why in Africa, French-speaking Africa, it was done. But you need to have, and that's maybe one of the subjects, you need to have maybe some regulatory bodies which are going to commit the people and the streamers which are reaping a lot of money to invest into the movie. In France, the CNC is levying, before the COVID came, 900 million euro a year on tax. And some of this money is going to be put into the distribution for independent distributor, independent filmmaker. And I think there's some other scheme. And this is crucial. And lastly, but not least, yes, the streamers, they thought they would have killed the cinema industry, and I would advise you to read the article in Le Monde yesterday. Cinema is back, and it's still very strong. And the mistake that the people, even the big companies in America, we saw that they will snub the theaters, they will still go direct to the platform. So they need to distribute the theaters to be first on the front line, and then you go on the different platform. So you need an incentive for the distribution from regulatory bodies. That's what I believe. And it's not only for Africa, it's worldwide. Look at some different countries, Korea, Israel, Canada, they are having these issues. They have dealt with it, and it will help the independent. Otherwise, the movie is going to be very difficult I'm a small-time distributor. I'm more happy with the production life right now, but I think this has to be pushed at the government level. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Francis. Now, let's talk about the intersection between politics and IP, because that has a lot to do with not just distribution, but, what we're able to do as content creators with our content. I know you have some background in law, so I would like to start with that, Betty.
Okay. Okay. So yes, obviously I live in France, and a lot of decisions are politically taken to protect the producer, to protect the distributors, and which is not the case, for instance, in some country in Africa. Having said that, in South Africa, the regulations, everything is meant to make sure that people get the IP, etc., etc. When it comes to IP, at the end of the day, if I take the example of France, for instance, they have what they call the SACD, the author's house. That means as a writer, you get your piece protected, and whenever the program, whenever your writing turns into productions and you have a series, a film, and it's broadcasted, on some of the French channels, you get what they call some royalties. So for me, that's a way for directors and also writers to get some money indirectly from their original contracts. So that's what I can say.
Okay. Does anyone else want to add to that?
I think I'll talk from the perspective of South Africa and where we find ourselves. For example, we went through the Copyright Amendment Act, which has been sitting on the president's desk forever. The political climate, we're going into elections end of this month, so he doesn't want to rub people the wrong way, so he hasn't signed the whole thing. The second thing is your Africa Free Trade Agreement, which for the continental Africa is very key, because if we are not able to have a borderless trade amongst ourselves, it affects how we create our IP as a continent. it affects the different regimes across the political affiliations. So the more the politics of the continent themselves are a problem in how we create IP and how effectively we can do it. But also if you look at Africa and the US under AGOA, when South Africa supports a different country, then we get put on a benchmark. Then our products cannot be distributed in the USA, or we are removed from preferential market access. So somehow, one way or the other, without harmony in politics, we find that the valuation of our IP becomes a problem. And when the valuation is a problem, the investment itself becomes a problem.
I agree. And I believe that the proliferation of, the digital platforms even poses a more bigger challenge in this regard. But let's talk about the proliferation of digitization now when it comes to content. Because previously, we had conventional platforms where people can display or distribute their content, but now we have all this, streaming platforms. Plus, we also have social media. Some people just create their content and just put it on YouTube. The other day, someone called me and wanted me to invest in a Nigerian movie that they said was going to be made for just $30,000 and put on YouTube, not on any platform. And they told me how much it was going to make. And I said, okay, well, I can do it, but don't put my name on it because I don't identify with something that is not of good quality. But so all this, now the content creators can just distribute their content straight if they want on YouTube or other platforms. Now, how has this affected the distribution industry? I'd like you to tackle that. And also, how can the playing ground be leveled, when it comes to ensuring that this proliferation of digitization does not, mean that our content is actually not receiving the maximum, income that it could get for us?
That's a big question, I think. First of all, on the streaming platforms, in the beginning, for instance, they invested a lot of money in Germany, in German cinema, but then they withdrew again. So as a producer, you always have to be flexible. So in that sense, I think using YouTube could be a good idea. But at the same time, the more product you have, the more difficult it is to get visibility for your content and for your film. So I think it still comes into the marketing. How much can you invest in marketing? How can you reach out to your audience? And I'm not sure if for me, I didn't use YouTube yet as a platform, so I don't know how that works, that you can really make sure that it's seen. And it's so difficult to make the audience aware when there are thousands of film around to see that film which you have produced. And maybe someone else here is more clever in the marketing. You smile already. So would you put something on YouTube?
Actually, I think that producers started to put their own product on YouTube because they couldn't reach out to distributors. They didn't know where to get, where to speak, how to. So it was difficult for them because whenever you want to deal with the likes of Netflix or Amazon, they will only go through distributors. You as a producer, it's going to be difficult for you to reach out to those level of streamers because they will not talk to you. They have so many, they receive so many requests that what they do, they are using the help of a distributor just to do the work for them, knowing that we know exactly what they are looking for, which I understand. So what I understand as well is that producers are trying to find some ways to survive and to reach out directly to their core audience or even more. So there are quite a few examples. One of them is this Senegalese filmmakers. She decided to go directly to YouTube, and it was a huge success. From that, the good thing is that this series was actually bought by a broadcaster, and her company, her production company, has been bought also by a huge channel as well. So you've got success stories like that. I've got another example of a lady also. She's decided to put everything, on YouTube, and she couldn't believe how many, she would actually touch millions of viewers in a certain country in Africa, outside this country in Africa, and she would also touch the diaspora as well. So it works in a way. So now I'm not also an expert on YouTube, so I don't know how it works when it comes to finance. She was telling me that sometimes they have some politic regulations and with some countries, and she should have probably get to create the account from France rather than from the African country to get the money or stuff like that. But to me, it's really enjoyable to see that producer are finding ways and means to reach their core audience.
Okay. When we speak about Nigeria, that I know quite well, you have 2,000 to 3,000 depending on your production. So obviously not everybody is going to make money. YouTube is definitely one channel. I wouldn't say it's the ultimate channel, but where your movie can be seen and you can still make money. I know Afro, for instance, is the leading platform in Nigeria to provide YouTube movies onto YouTube, and they get good money for the people. So at least the little producer, the filmmakers, because most of the time we shouldn't forget, and I think it's money borrowed from friends and families. So it's not grants, and grants is only for art house movies, whether you go to Berlinale, to the CNC and everything. So it's a different, you don't have in 2000. So I believe that's one. Then secondly, before coming back to the digitalization, yes, I'm happy to see that even the streamers now understand that they will get not only a better return on investment if the movie is being released in cinemas. And now Netflix is investing in cinemas because they need to get a quota of certain movies to be released in theaters before going to the Oscar. Only in Cannes, maybe, sorry, I'm French, but it's true that forbidden Netflix to come on board with the movies. But Apple is able because Apple has understood that they are not have understood. They play the role and they put movies release into cinemas. So I believe Windows media release has to be followed in order to make, and this will increase the IP value for the African content. And in the Netflix charts, if you have so many releases now in theaters, whatever the numbers, they will pay you more if you have not been released, for instance. So I believe now people are coming to an institution, and Netflix has been obliged to invest 40 million for 50 million last year in France in movies in order to have their movies on the platform being released in cinema. So I think it's really not a chicken and egg story, but the machine, the way of consuming has changed. Everybody wants to watch. You don't have the same type of level of production and quality of filmmakers, so everybody has to be happy. So definitely digitalization, YouTube and everything. But finally, I believe that all the streamers is mainly for TV series, not for films. I mean, only if you want to watch a new movie again. Sorry to say. I hope there are no streamers here. Send them a dead duck.
For TV series, for series and not for movies. I like that one. Yeah. I wish. Yeah, but I want to ask you, what can be done, by the community of content creators and producers to ensure that we hold our government accountable? Because, for instance, in Canada, I'm the chair of the board for Real World Film Festival, and we actually, advocated for the government to do something about the digital platforms like Netflix and Amazon and Prime. So we have the Canada Media Fund that gives out funding for projects. And right now, the government is trying to make sure that Netflix and Amazon and all these guys can contribute to the Canada Media Fund so that Canadians can get access to funding to produce content, right? And I don't know if you heard, there was a war between Meta and the Canadian government recently where the government wanted them to pay for news content that, is all over their platforms. And at some point, the government pulled out all their ads on the platform. So no Canadian government ads on Facebook anymore. And it was a big thing. It was a very big thing. And they lost a lot of, I know it's a drop in their buckets of how much they have, but it did actually, get a lot of things happening for content producers. And right now the government is saying to these platforms, you have to have a certain, percentage of Canadian content. Otherwise, we can't have you in our country. So what can be done in Africa, especially to ensure that, content producers are protected? Because without the funding that they need, they can't continue to make good content. Yeah. You, because you're government.
This is the most favorite part of the conversation. I think in Africa, the industry is evolving. And in first world countries, it's a bit more organized in terms of unions, industry organizations, etc. I've observed that in South Africa, the producers' organizations are getting stronger now, and they actually can get government to listen in terms of what they need for the industry. But where we find is there's a gap is data. We don't have enough. Government works on data. You can, what we call toy in South Africa, you can pick it as much as you want. But if you can't provide data for economic impact that says to government, pay attention to the sector. If you're not able to provide data to show how streaming platforms are literally stripping our intellectual property and leaving our people vulnerable from a social security point of view, government needs that data to be able to legislate. So what I find is now a challenge is how does the industry organize itself, collate the data, and have the funding, which is now a biggest problem. You need funding to lobby government because you need lawyers, you need experts. What you find then, the streamers come and fund the organizations to do the lobbying. So then from a government point of view, it's like, but then who are we really trying to solve the problem for? Because your industry, you're complaining about platforms, but the platforms are funding your lobbying. So it kind of gets confused. But the more we establish the industry, which I think we are fast approaching that point where the industry is becoming self-sustainable. And as an independent voice, the government is always willing to listen, but data has to be cohesive. We need to have competent lawyers and everyone that can challenge government. And to do that, we need the capital to do that. Unfortunately, the government can't even finance people to fight them either. So the sector must arrange itself, arrange the capital, and put forward a case.
Okay. That's amazing. So what I gather is that we have to come together as a group and lobby, but then we need, resources to do that, right? Okay, Francis, want to add?
Yes, not only that, I think you need really the will to do it. Every time I'm in Nigeria, I'm advocating this, change the new regulators, because it's too much money which is coming out of the country and not being reinvested. I really believe, sorry to say, CNC and this film festival in Cannes has been settled by the union of the film industry in France just after the World War. So this is very important. The government, okay, maybe it's too much, but you have to have the people and the union itself to say, yes, we want this. When you see, as you said, Patricia, on Netflix platform, so many Nigerian movies, how many money has been coming back to the filmmaker itself? Very few. The distributor took most of the money. Come on, let's face it. Let's call a cat a cat. So there need to be a will at the political level. And also it depends on human beings. Obviously, it depends how the people are feeling towards. So I believe we should push, not only me, the people from the industry should push for this to the detriment of their pocket, but it is for the benefit on the long term, I think, of the industry. The will has to be there. There is a will, as you say, there is a way. Sorry.
I like that. Yeah, that's amazing. I consider myself an advocate when it comes to, making sure that not only are, voices of people of African heritage and the diaspora heard, but that we are empowered financially, because without money, I realize nothing can be done. So as you said, we have to have the will, and that's important. It's important for me. I don't know how much time we have, Prudence. 5 minutes. Okay. So one last question, which I think everyone is interested in, is how can there be equity, not equality, equity, when it comes to distributing African content and what, people are ready to pay for it? Because sometimes, for instance, I just made a movie and someone said to me, oh, I know it has a Black, story. Don't distribute it to Africa, to Netflix, because they'll pay you less. Look for a North American distributor and you get more. So that right there just shows me that African movie, content creators, producers are paid less. So what can be done to ensure that? Because You said our stories are rich. And I know I've heard that people can use little money to make movies in Africa, but I think that's because there's no access to funding. So what can be done to ensure that, there's equity when it comes to being paid the right money?
Maybe tell more about the success stories, like you told, films on YouTube, which worked really well to make more visible that African content really reaches out to a large audience and make people aware of it. So that would be my first idea.
No. I do think that, yes, visibility is important, obviously. And also your strategy when it comes to your relationship with your distributor, for instance. For me, it's like it's an agreement between your distributor and the producer. So you have to probably, and as I said, I had success stories also with streamers. At some point, they wanted the movie to be to be bought, this amount of money, but we've managed strategically with all our tools. We were using some the social media, showing that these actors actually had so many followers. So obviously, if these actors is visible in this territory, let's give a chance to this next movie with this actor. So you should put more money. So it's a tough negotiations that can take months, I would say. But there's always a way, because we are human being, to push further an amount of money to get some more equity, to get some more respect from the content buyers in front of you. So I do believe that it's a way of pushing, of using social media, of using and providing a good casting as well, which can be Pan-African, which can be a little bit European, to have a crew with some people from Africa, from you. It's a mix of everything that will make sure your content is valued in a way. And I do believe it's feasible, yes.
Oh, okay, that's a tricky question. Well, I would say just first make a bloody damn good movie with good story. Yeah, no, it's true. That's okay, but that's starting point. Because if you don't, I agree with you. Then I had the experience to try to distribute in France in theater. I think Patrick gave me one cinema hall in Saint-Denis where whenever there is a movie being released from Bollywood, all the Indian community goes and see it. The diaspora is not that united, let's face it. It's diverse, French-speaking, English-speaking, so many dialects, so many different ways of having still African stories, but they are not going. And on top of it, it's a question of education as well. The people who are young, who are going to the movie, they are more used now to go straight on a smartphone to see a movie rather than going to a big screen. So I think education. So that's very big point because it was a total failure. I learned from my mistake and yes, I said, okay, I will concentrate. Maybe I'll do it in French-speaking Africa. Then, yes, when I look at the release of, for instance, successful movies in Nigeria, the blockbusters, the box office being big, you can get a good movie being reached 1 point. Social media, yes, Funke Akindele, she's got 16 million followers on Instagram, so definitely the social media is going to pay. But when she tried to do it, in America or in UK, it's not the same. This is the issue. This is a very big issue. So, yes, it's not good enough to make good movies, but I think it's a contribution. And again, I'm sorry to say, government has to be there and subsidizing. Otherwise, it's going to be a failure. I'm sorry to say. If you don't get 30, 50K minimum from the government, they do it in France. Independent filmmakers, they can go with independent distributor. They will apply, fill up the form. I'm sure you do it in Germany too. So this is how you help. Art house movies, Mariëtte has been released in so many countries. There are hardly any numbers. It's good. People will go, the cinephiles, black and white picture, but it's not good enough if you don't have enough money behind to do it. So I really believe, again, it comes back to make sure you tax the people who are in the industry to the level they want so they can have more movies available for the African diaspora. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for this amazing conversation. Thank you, Francis, Betty, Bigosho and Mariëtte. And thank you all for being here and for listening to this conversation. We'll be talking about global distribution for African content. And I really love everything everyone said. And I think it's time for us as content creators to do what we need to do to ensure that our labor is not just a labor of love. I tell you, money is great. I can tell you that. All right, do take care. I'm Patricia, Bebia, Mawa.